Welcome to the Queer Spirit Podcast. I'm your host, Nick Venegoni. Here we have conversations with artists, healers, and activists who enliven the LGBTQ communities and who empower our queer spirits to flourish. Before we get started with the interview, if you haven't heard, I've started a Patreon account for the podcast. Patreon is a way for you to help support the show and get special rewards in return, such as a thank you shout out on the show and an enamel button with the Queer Spirit logo. This year, I've also added access to videos of the podcast interviews and a free monthly live virtual sound bath. If you'd like to join in supporting the show, just go to patreon.com/queerspirit. You can also find the link in the show notes. Any Patreon funds remaining after the basic production costs will be donated to nonprofits supporting diverse queer communities. Once again, that link is patreon.com/queerspirit. Thanks for your consideration. My guests today are Kerel, Dawon, and Jerrell, who are the hosts of the Minoritea Report podcast. Minoritea Report is a weekly BIPOC Gay podcast. Join your aunties Kerel, Dawon, and Jerrell as they catch up and spill the tea about the Black and POC LGBTQIA+ experience, relationships, politics, sports, and pop culture. Today, the guys share the story of how they met and why they decided to start the podcast. We talk about the importance of representing variety within the queer BIPOC communities and showing that to the world. They discuss the ways the last year's recent events have impacted them and how that is reflected on their show. And lastly, we talk about wigs. Find Minoritea Report on your favorite podcast platform as well as videos of the show on YouTube. That's MINORITEA Report. Minoritea Report. Hi, guys. Welcome to the show. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. So this is my first time having a foursome on the show. So I thought for the sake of our listeners to just have you each go around and just share your name and your location and your auntie name.
I am Kerel. I'm in Atlanta, Georgia, and my auntie name is Auntie Vodka.
My name is Dawon. I'm in New York City, and my auntie name is Auntie Chardonnay.
And I'm Jerrell. I'm in Seattle, Washington, and I am Auntie Hennessy.
All right. So for those of you who don't know these guys, they are the hosts of the Minoritea Report podcast. And a big part of their show is they do an Ask Yo AunTeas segment where they dole out advice to listeners. And they have their auntie names that they go by during that part of the show. So that's all about. So I wonder if we could start out just by having you share the story about how you guys all met.
Oh, man. Dawon and I met first. We both used to live in Chicago. And so there was a bar in Chicago that sponsored both of our volleyball teams. And so every Sunday we'd play volleyball league, go to the bar that sponsored the team. And so it'd be like the team that I was on, the team that Dawon was on. And then just one Sunday, we're like, okay, you guys are over there. We're over here. We see each other every Sunday. Let's just combine our forces and just kiki it up. And so literally every Sunday, be shots, drinks, food, looking at boys, everything. And and so that's how Dawon and I met and just became good friends after that. And then I met Jerrell through some friends in Chicago as well that he was friends with. So like we had like some of the same circles. And then he didn't live in Chicago, but he might as well. He was there all the damn time. And so just through those same circles, became friends with him and became fast friends with him as well. And then I let them talk about how they met each other.
Well, it was really interesting because we became connected through Facebook, and we were outside of just having mutual friends, but we would always find ourselves commenting on the same things. And then eventually we ended up tagging each other on the same things. And then we just, said, well, why aren't we connected? We have all these same friends. And we have all of it. We probably had like 80 of the same friends, and not like Facebook friends, but, like real legitimate people that we hung out with and knew and whatnot. And, we've just been, sisters and buddies ever since.
Yeah. Honestly, I feel like it was like the last this true friendship that I have gotten on my own. Like I wasn't introduced to you by someone. It wasn't at a bar. It wasn't, we gravitated towards each other just by being ourselves. And I was like, we need to connect for real. Yeah.
Love that.
And how long ago was that?
Maybe 3-4 years ago. And then we didn't even physically meet in person until 2 years ago? After the podcast was started.
Oh.
That was the first time. We literally saw each other and we were like, is this really the first time? It was just it didn't feel like it. But we're sitting here oh my God, this is the first time. But it don't feel like it at all whatsoever.
15, yeah. How? It's more than halfway to 10 years that we've known each other. It's crazy.
And yeah, then Dawon and I have known each other since 2015, 6 years. Crazy to think, damn, 6 years. Right? That's wild.
And so whose idea was it to start the podcast?
It was mine. And I kind of always wanted to do a podcast, but it was kind of one of those things at first where it was just okay, you always say you want to do something, but you're too busy. Especially at that time, I was traveling a lot for work, et cetera, et cetera. And so I got laid off from that job in 2018. And I was like, okay, I'm going to have a little more time on my hands. What are some things that I haven't just had time to do that I truly want to do? And podcasting was one of those things that popped in my head. And every time Dawon and I get together, we're always talking about politics. We're always talking about this. We're always talking about that and having these deep, in-depth conversations that I'm like, actually, maybe that's a route to go. Maybe Dawon would be interested in this as well. So I asked him and he was interested. And then once we were kind of starting to think about it and plan it out, I was like, you know what? Dawon and I could get too long with it probably for sometimes. And so I was like, who's going to break this up? Who's just going to pop in and just give us a little spitfire a little bit? And I was like, okay, who do I know that A, would want to potentially do it? That'll be diligent and consistent to do it. I was like, Jerrell. And he was that missing link. He's just that point, because we all have our moments where we're pretty black and white on things. I'm probably the most gray out of the three. Jerrell is pretty much, it's black and white. It is what it is. And that's it, and it kind of breaks Dawon and I up a little bit, which is awesome. And quite frankly, over time, I've kind of probably taken on moments of Jerrell's personality. All kind of started to take parts of each other's personalities.
Have there ever been any big disagreements?
Yeah. It happens. But the funny thing is, it probably happens more after the show than when we're not recording. We typically have a podcast before the podcast one. And that's normally the key. So that shows a lot about how much we can say in an episode, because it's still an hour and a half after that.
Yeah.
But then afterwards, when we're trying to do a lot of the recordings and stuff like that, and we may still drag one of the conversations that we talked about that we actually recorded. And that's when I'd be like, what you said, go back to the tape. Go back to the tape. Wait till I have to edit this. I'll see it there. It pretty much happens then. But even then, once we're done, it's just oh my God. All right, we'll see y'all next week. Love y'all. It's literally water off a duck's back. This.
Okay, girl, right.
So, Kerel, what was your vision for the podcast when you first started thinking about it?
Honestly, I didn't see specifically Black friends that were in the queer community just talking about it all. I felt a lot of the representation for Black gay men and people of color was very monolithic. It was either very fabulous or toxic masculinity, things like that, which, yes, that's part of the community, things like that. But it's okay, as much as they might show someone being a hairdresser and makeup artist, there's people that look like us that are in corporate America doing our daily 9-to-5s, that are in relationships, that are interracial relationships, which is another common denominator that we have. And I just felt if I had something like our show when I was 16, when I was not even just 16, 25, 28 coming out and things like that, and dealing with myself, it would have been maybe a little bit easier and a little bit better, just because I saw someone out there going through the same stuff. So that's where it came, the foundation of it. And talking about what we care about, quite frankly. It's just whether it's comic books, whether it's Beyonce, which is a lot of the times, whether it's Black Lives Matter and things like that. we want to cover it all. And so like when the foundation of just thinking what it would be, that was like the initial thoughts. Cause I was like, I'm interested in so many things. And then now I have friends that like I could talk to that are interested in a vast array of topics. Let's put it out there. And quite frankly, it's been interesting because I feel like I've almost come even more into myself throughout this experience that I don't think I foresaw that. Like at the beginning, I was like, oh, I'm pretty comfortable with myself. I feel like 2 years in, I'm way more comfortable with myself. It might be even as simply as I have family members that, listen to it as well. And they're even hearing more that and having these conversations that I probably wouldn't really have with them. But now that they hear it, it's kind of opened up those windows as well. So
I'm curious to hear from the other two if you feel like being on the show has changed you in any way at all.
I say it all the time. Yeah, honestly, like Kerel was saying earlier, like I am very much the black and white type person, but I've learned through having, my two Judys like teach me, and show me another perspective, another way to look at certain things. I've learned to be like, all right, sometimes take a pause and think, outside of how you may feel in this moment, and where you're coming from. It's really taught me how to sit and listen, to someone else, and not just listen to someone who always agree with you, because there's a difference to learning how to listen to someone and agree with you and learning to listen when someone's disagreeing with you. And being on this podcast has taught me how to be able to do both. And it's not really much difference. You just have to really come with a sense of compassion and just respect, to be able to do the two. But, like Kerel said, I mean, like, honestly, everything that we were doing, like I was doing individually with the two of them, has just continued to happen on the podcast. And it's honestly like another arm from our relationship. Like, we was already having these conversations with Kerel and our group of people when we would be traveling or whatever. And I was already on social media with Dawon having similar conversations, even like today with the color folders for the different, for math class, like it's always been that way. And it's just even better just to have that more consistently in my life. So.
Yeah, I'm a little long in the tooth, as they say. And so while I feel that I'm pretty settled in terms of who I am as a person and what I believe, but I think the thing that's been really astonishing is, for me, and where my growth has been, is really as a result of these conversations being more therapeutic and the ability to be able to unpack the things that have been happening both in our the social world and the political world and our personal lives. There are so many common experiences, shared experiences that we all have, but we don't have the same perspective. And I think, to Kerel's point earlier about the point of the show, it's not to say that there aren't other, Black queer shows that are out there or Black queer shows that are having topical conversations. But, I think what brings, what's different about this, in my opinion, is you're getting three very unique perspectives from, three very unique individuals that are engaging in really authentic, real conversations. And yeah, we can kiki and talk about a lot of frivolous things, but we also we don't shy away from the difficult conversations. So when you've asked a question about, have you ever disagreed? When we talk about serious things, and sometimes not so many serious things, but when we talk about serious things, we do have a very strong difference of opinion sometimes. But I think the beauty that our listeners get, and that I personally get from that, is we get to work through those differences. We get to practice active listening. We get to hear each other's point of view. Sometimes we have to check ourselves emotionally, and I've been doing that quite a lot. But it's part of the journey and part of the process. So for someone who's a little bit more settled, I'm a little bit older, it's been great to have this as an outlet to express those thoughts, and to also be reflective on how that has opened my mind to, different ways of viewing things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I was also just thinking, as you guys were all talking, it's interesting that all of you live in these different cosmopolitan cities. And so I imagine even just that, like having that lived experience of being a Black queer person in those different cities, you can say, well, this is what it's like for me as a Black queer person in this city on the East Coast or the West Coast or the North or the South. And, you're getting all of those different perspectives. And I imagine that also probably colors some of just your opinions and what you can share about what's happening and the triangulated across the country.
I remember when the pandemic started and there was a big news article about the gays that went to Fire Island. Do you guys remember that?
Yeah.
And just caught holy hell from these two. Like, you're people out there messing it up for everybody.
For everybody.
And then not more than 2 weeks later in Atlanta, here they were.
Just turning up. That's interesting that you picked up on that, because especially this last year between Black Lives Matter and COVID, because like at the beginning, New York was like the hotbed. So just even kind of hearing Dawon and his experiences at the beginning, and then moving to like Black Lives Matter, where like literally Buckhead was like on fire here in Atlanta. And then the shooting of not George Floyd, but the one that got shot here in Atlanta at the Wendy's and things like that. So just like a lot of the stuff happening here. And then Black Lives Matter over in Seattle, where they're literally shutting down blocks of places in Seattle. And so just to hear Jerrell's perspective of that, it's definitely been an interesting year of having the podcast and just the timing of releasing it, because you can't foresee that 2 years ago. You didn't know this would, like, even though we know cops were shooting us then and all that, but it's just like just the amount and just the magnitude of this last year has been quite interesting. And there's been moments where we've been so raw and just tired on the podcast. You hear it. We've had tears. It's just like the last year has been just so emotionally draining at times. But in a weird way, we literally have a time capsule now, a timestamp of these parts of our lives that we could go back in the future and listen to and be like, man, that's how I truly was feeling in that moment. That's how the community, that's what we call our listeners, the community, was asking particular questions in that moment. And I think that's going to be something even 10 years down the line that we're going to look back and be like, that was really cool to be able to have this and really have these weekly therapy sessions with one another and the guests that we had on those particular weeks.
Yeah, I mean, that was something I was going to bring up. I think it's really interesting that you just have, your show is just over 2 years old now, and you got it started to get enough traction and cohesion right before all these big things started happening in the world. And I'm curious if you've gotten feedback from your listeners or your community about, how it may have been impactful or supportive for them through these times.
Yeah, we have specific ones that are like very ride or die, like that we hear from daily, multiple times a day, which we adore because they keep us in check too. Like they be reading the hell out of us, but
fact checked everything.
Right? Exactly. People like, that ain't true. Which we love. But yes, we've heard many a times that like it's been a therapy session for them, and they're grateful to have a podcast specifically from people within the community, be able to just speak raw and authentically and saying, hey, we don't like this administration, and these are the reasons why. And for like the new administration, this is what we need for our community specifically, and not holding our tongues back, because we've held our tongues back long enough, and we feel comfortable and vulnerable enough to share it. And the community as well, even with their Ask Yo Auntie questions and things like that, are vulnerable enough to share with us what's going on in their lives, and even asking us for opinion and advice that I don't know, like sometimes I'm like, okay, did we give the right answer? I don't know. But from our perspective, that's what we want to provide to you. And we've had many emails, many DMs of just thanks for you guys just being yourselves and as authentic as you can, because it's refreshing to see. Specifically, what another thing we've kind of realized is like just seeing 3 friends platonically, within the queer community. You just don't see that often enough either. And that was, even though that's the basis of our show, something that like, I don't even know I really fully thought of at the beginning. It's just like, oh, we're friends, duh. But just to seeing that, the visibility of that out there is something that we hear a lot about as well.
Yeah, and I've had a few people just mention that like, during the pandemic when people were quarantined and people were locked away in their homes, not being able to see other people, and then how our conversations are very like inviting, and it's like you're talking with your good friends, like it's kitchen table talk, with your aunties. And I've had people say that while I was quarantined at home and I could not see people, like hearing y'all podcast has given them a sense of like comfortable in community. Like they've been able to feel connected, like they were actually hanging out with us, so it's been, I've had some people say how comforting it's been just to have three voices, unique voices, at the same time consistently.
Our lovely melanated skin, glowing on the screen. Come on now.
Well, also just the fact that you guys all live in 3 different cities and you were connecting this way with each other before the pandemic, you were kind of modeling like, hey, you can still keep in touch with your friends and have a connection and do this.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. Covering the news coast to coast.
Right. It was funny. We were looking at recently we were looking at like the early episodes, like, because even then we were using Skype before we switched over to Zoom, and just looking at some of that early stuff, we're like, man, we were doing this before, but it was a little rough at the beginning.
So for the Ask Yo AunTeas segment, you often wear wigs, and I'm wondering if you can share a little bit about how you got started with that. And I've watched some of those segments and I'm just like, oh, this person kind of has that style wig and this person kind of has that style wig. And, I've noticed that Kerel's style is usually kind of all over the place, but Dawon has a particular look and Jerrell usually has a particular look.
I do think our wigs reflect our personality, like our auntie names.
That's a true statement. That is a true statement.
Yeah. Short to the point. That's exactly who I am. And she long in the tooth, so she got you. She give you bundles.
You're right. That is true. And that's probably why I'm Auntie Vodka, because it just goes with everything. Like, it's whatever I'm feeling in that moment. If it's electric green, if it's purple, if it's blue, if it's a short bob, if it's Beyonce waves, whatever I'm feeling in the moment. But how did we first start? It probably was Dawon.
I think Dawon put us on. Yeah, it was totally Dawon.
I have a collection of wigs that I am very proud of. And, I have a friend and a mutual friend of all of ours that got me started in it. And it's really not coming from any particular place other than just, life is so much fun when you just are wearing a wig. And literally, there's nothing else. It's not like we're cross-dressing and put on makeup and, there's nothing wrong with that. But it's literally just the absurdity of being a man, with a beard where the hair is like whatever it is and it's getting caught in your beard. And it's so absurd and so liberating at the same time. And, there's an element of just not taking yourself so seriously. And so, as for us, it was just like, we don't have a rhyme or reason as to when we're wearing them. Generally, when we have guests, we don't wear them. I don't know.
Because it seems to take over the show.
Right. Because if you really watch the show, we are literally playing with our hair the entire time, brushing it, twisting it, twirling it, flipping it, looking at ourselves in the mirror. We're still engaged in a conversation, but we are so zeroed in on whatever hairstyle that we're rocking at that point. Yeah, it just goes like that.
That's how we bald-headed. That's how with the exception of Kerel, that's how we don't got no hair because we don't know how to act when we got a wig on our head.
It's so everything. It really is. I feel like, again, like Dawon, you nailed it. It's like, you don't have to take yourself so seriously all the damn time, And if you want to look fabulous in a wig, let's do it. And literally, it's like out the blue, be like, you want to wear a wig tonight? Okay, let's do it. It's that simple. It truly is. So it's just like, oh, we haven't done it in a while. Okay, it's due time for a wig episode. And literally, the second we put them on, it's like, we almost need to come up with auntie names for the wigs. Like, because we got a different alter egos, like a little pep in our chest and step and everything. Like, it's great.
And it only takes one of us to show up in a wig. That's the funny thing about it. That's how it ends up happening. We'll log on to Zoom and we got, she got wig up. I want a wig. I'll be right back. We just instantly get jealous and we're like, and we're all in wigs. This is a wig episode.
But we also, because, our community has picked up on it, we've had wig parties. So we'll invite our community and have a wig party. And, for no other reason, just to join into the fun and invite people in and see what kind of wigs they have on. And it's become a very fun thing. And we're hopeful that once this pandemic is finally under control, we can actually, make a in-person gathering where, wigs can be a good part of it.
They will be snatched.
So, Dawon, why did you have a collection of wigs to begin with?
Yeah, my friend got me into it. I bought one and it just wasn't enough because I really couldn't decide. My foray into wigs was I thought I needed to go really, really long because, I don't know, I'm gay and you have to do everything over the top and just wanted like length. But then I quickly realized that you can't really do a lot with, first of all, synthetic hair because it's not real. So it's not moving the way that real hair moves when it's really long. And I was spending like maybe $20 or $30 for a wig. So, but then I was just like, I really want like range and I want body yaddy yaddy. And so I was like, I can't do anything when it's like just drooping. And so I ended up getting like a curlier wig that's like just Donna Summer, meets mahogany, and it's, honey brown and whatever. And it just grew from there. And then I was addicted. I was like, okay, I'm going back to the wig store and I'm getting another one, and became like friends with like the ladies that, that help you. And it just snowballed. And now I have probably, I don't know, like maybe 25, I think. Maybe 25, yeah.
I want to say you are that friend for me, by the way. Like our mutual friend is that friend. You are that friend for me. Because I didn't have not a narrow wig until, and she actually bought me my first wig too. She bought me my first wig because I didn't have one, the rainbow one.
And do you ever wear them out?
Yeah, our first anniversary, yeah.
I mean, we've been locked up for a long time, so I haven't really, like our first year, we really didn't start the wigs until like halfway through. So we only had like another 7 months before we were all in lockdown. And our first wig party we were on lockdown. So yeah, I haven't gotten the chance to, but I'm ready.
I would do it. I do also kind of feel like it's a thing that I do with my friends. Like it's not for show in the sense of I'm going to walk out in the street and try to get attention, or, I want to turn heads and da-da-da-da-da. It's really like, when friends come over, well, she turns heads for other reasons. But it's really a communal thing. And for me anyways, it's always been a communal thing. I have always wondered what it would be like to, to go to the beach with like, a little bit of hair and just for that experience. But for the most part, I haven't really explored that.
I'm imagining that you invite your friends over and it's like wine and wigs.
Literally.
Facts.
Exactly.
Facts.
My first time in New York visiting her, night one, literally in wigs.
I could not get him and his partner away from the mirror. I have a floor-length mirror in the living room, and literally they were on crooked, but they were just living their best lives. And his partner loved the red one that I have, the Ariel one, and just loved it.
It's kind of mesmerizing.
It is.
Yeah.
There is something about it. Like, you cannot not be happy.
Yeah.
Like, with the wig on.
Nick, do you have a wig?
I used to have a blue wig that was about this long. I'm not sure if I still have it because I have like a costume bag,
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
but I'm not sure if I still have it.
You need to get you one. You got to get you a new one.
Yeah. I used to wear it for, around Halloween and stuff like that. So, yeah. But I also used to work in theater, and I worked at the San Francisco Opera for a couple of years. And so, I knew the people who worked in the wig shop and, stuff like that. So.
Oh, see, so you could have got some good wigs then. Let me find a friend who can make some wigs.
She could have had some of that Rock Me Amadeus wigs,
right? Oh, powder that damn wig. Come on now.
Well, they make them from scratch. So, yeah, it's a lot. It's labor intensive.
Let me find a friend that makes wigs, bitch.
But there are times where literally I would be home. My partner would be doing his work or whatever. And if I didn't have Zoom calls during the day, or if it's the weekend, or if it's a night, I'll just go into my little wig drawer and pull out. I'm like, what do I feel like today? And I'll just put it on, and I'll just be sitting here watching TV with my wig on. That's it.
I have done that too.
I recommend everyone out there, whoever's listening, get yourself a wig. And don't necessarily lean on the costumey kind of wigs. Get yourself a nice, a wig that has a personality, whatever that personality is.
Yeah.
Think Moira Rose.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
So I like to end the show by asking the same question, but since there's 3 of you, I'm going to have to ask it 3 times. So we have to make enough room for it. So I'm going to repeat the question again, which I shared with you at the beginning, which is, can you share with us a person, practice, or experience that has supported your queer spirit to flourish?
His name is Peter Peter Noss, just an amazing soul. I remember I was 18 when I came out, and I had been out for like 4 months, and I was like seeing this guy, and it was like horrible. He was physically abusive, and I was like at this volleyball party for this tournament, and he like saw me crying. He just came up to me and just literally was like, "Are you okay?" And he was just so comforting, and he just like became like just like my fairy godmother, you know, like for like the next like 10 years, he was like always like inviting me to everything. Like I was like sleeping at his place. We were going on trips together, like just teaching me about the community and like, you know, different types of sides of the community, you know, from like the leather to sports to all sorts of different, you know, pockets of the queer community, and just being comfortable being a gay man. You know, and he was also older too. So like, he also had that wisdom, you know, like there was like I want to say like a 16, 18 year like age gap, you know? And so it was like literally like having like the older uncle or brother or cousin, whatever, that I didn't have because I was the oldest growing up, to really just kind of like help me feel comfortable coming into the queer community and coming into myself, you know, as a queer man. So like, I actually just texted him like a couple days ago, because we don't talk as much now, but I was just like, it was just like a thank you text, just like, you know, I'm just so grateful for you.
Oh man. Thank you, Peter, for sure. No doubt. For me, like two spectrums of it kind of pops up. Like the first gay friend I ever made when I moved to Chicago was a guy named Garrett, and still friends with him to this day. We don't speak as often, but like if I see him, it's just straight up love. Like every year he still sends me a birthday card, which he knows means a shit ton to me. I just love those small little sentiments and things like that. But he was like the first person, like he's just so unapologetically himself. Like he's so freaking goofy, and like he's at the bars dancing on the tables. He'll be the first one on the boxes in the clubs and stuff. And he was the first one. Literally, he came up to me at the bar because I didn't know a lot of people in Chicago at that point. And he's like, "Hey, I see you standing here by yourself. I just moved here. You want to be my friend?" And literally, that was how we became friends. And literally, first gay friend, I could call him to be like, "Hey, I'm going out. You want to go out?" He was always down to go out as I was like further exploring the Chicago gay scene and things like that. So even to this day, like I just tell him all the time, I'm like, I'm so thankful that you like came up to me that night, because I don't know if I would have been comfortable enough at that point to stay with it, if that makes sense, to stay within the scene, because I was so straight up used to hanging out with like my straight friends and things like that, and that was it. That was fine. He was the one that was like, "No, we're going to Sidetrack. No, we're going to Big Chicks. No, we're going here. We're going there." And I'm extremely thankful for him for that. But then like on the other side of the spectrum, I'm so thankful for this podcast, because there's even parts of me that it allows me to further show that I don't know if friends that tune in would completely see, especially on a week in, week out basis. And it just allows me to show more aspects of myself. So like some groups of friends might have seen this part of me, and some groups of friends might have seen this part of me, but the podcast is now allowing me to show, hey, I still care about music. I still like sports. I still like this, but I'm going to throw a wig on with the quickness. I'm going to do this, and I'm going to be like, yes, bitch, yes, you know, and it just to see a fuller spectrum of Kerel. So it's just interesting. Chicago for me is just the foundation of a lot of my queerness, and to be on a podcast with friends that I know from Chicago, and then just thinking of Garrett from Chicago and things like that, and to now see myself at 37, it's just kind of interesting. So Chicago's a foundation. Thank you, Garrett, and thank you to these two gentlemen in the podcast.
I'm going to say, and this is a throwback, and it's not a person that I knew personally, but it's Pedro Zamora from the Real World San Francisco. And that might seem a little superficial, but for a young gay black boy who struggled with his sexuality and never really saw, in his experience, never really saw positive portrayals of gay men, particularly, that weren't the butt of the joke or that weren't being villainized in some kind of way, that fed into my own interpersonal trauma, struggling with, my own identity. He was the first person that I saw that lived in his truth fully and, did not reinforce those stereotypical, it just didn't reinforce those stereotypes of what being gay is supposed to look like. He was an activist. He was an excellent communicator. He was HIV positive, and that was in part of the height of the AIDS and HIV pandemic, but for me, he gave me the courage to say the words out loud, I am gay. And, the concept of being part of this podcast and one of the threads of my own professional life is to be that person that inspires others to live their true selves more fully, more authentically, and hopefully, through my example, they can have the courage to do those things as well. So shout out to Pedro. He's done a lot of amazing things in the world. And, there are a lot of people in my life that have helped my growth, but that was the one that gave me the courage to say those really powerful words, I am gay, out loud. And I will never forget that.
Beautiful. Thank you guys. So where can people find you guys and check out your show?
Yeah, we're on all the socials, Minority Report. So that's like spilling tea, sipping tea, Minority Report on all socials. Twitter's MT Report. But also subscribe to YouTube. That's where you can really see how animated and see all the fabulous wigs and all that. So subscribe on YouTube. New episodes every Monday. Every once in a while, twice a week. We just did 2 episodes in 1 week. But yeah, all the socials, Minority Report, and then YouTube as well.
All right. Well, I'll have those links in the show notes so people can find them there. And thank you guys for having me on your show, a couple months ago. And thank you for reciprocating and gracing me with your presence.
Oh, thanks for having us so much.
To find the resources we discussed today, find the show notes at thequeerspirit.com. And if you enjoyed the show, remember to subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes. This will help us reach and support more queer people all over. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.